All right, Matthew, welcome to episode 47 of the Performance Advantage podcast. This week, we're catching up with Matt's Crankworx experience, me getting back into training. This week in sports that we talk about, the coronavirus, what's going to go on, Olympics? Not sure. And training for a marathon, everything you need to know with myself, Dr. Will O'Connor and Dr. Matt Miller, sports scientists. Shout out to our sponsors, EnduranceTrainingHub.com and SmartMTBTraining.com, self-coaching software to help you train smarter. It's just $10 a month. That's all it is. Get on there, get a training plan, and get training for your next race. All right, Matt, it's been a couple of weeks. Welcome back. I heard you got coronavirus.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, it has been a couple weeks because I was in Rotorua again. It seems like every time I say what's been going on, I've been in Rotorua. But this time it was for a very specific event of Crankworx. So one of the biggest cycling events in the world. There's a 3-part series. One in New Zealand and one in Europe and one in Canada. Massive events, and I was invited to do an expo this year. So that's what I did. And I joined up with Jono Church from the Suspension Lab in Rotorua, and it just seemed like a really good match because he's super analytical, uses a lot of data in his suspension tuning, and we collaborated, did a project earlier in the year, or end of last year, with EWS racer Sam Shaw, and we measured his suspension and his braking. So it just ended up being a really good collaboration, set up the tent, showed everyone the Brake Ace, which is now what we're calling it. We launched a new website just before the show, had a big article come out on Pink Bike, had a massive amount of views, got a really good response, even in the comments. And it just ended up being this whirlwind week. And it was awesome. Got lots of really good feedback through the week. Didn't get to see any events, but I was there, and now I'm sick. So.
Okay, well, you've had a week standing at the booth for like 12 hours a day. For the new listeners, what is the Brake Ace? Give us your elevator pitch.
Okay, so the Brake Ace is the world's first brake power meter and automatic coaching software. So what the Brake Ace does is it tells you what you did with your brakes, but it doesn't stop there. It tells you what you can do and where you can go to improve. So we had it tested by a professional skills coach. He loved it. And we know that we can offer remote skills coaching based on the information that the Brake Ace software gives us. So it is the future of mountain biking, and it's going to help everyone ride smoother, faster, safer, and have more fun.
Awesome. And I know you didn't get to see much, but you saw a bit of Crankworx. What was the coolest thing?
After dark, and we had just closed up the tent. But it's where we were, I couldn't really see much. And the only thing that we could see where the tent was the slope style. And when that was going on is when the tent was absolutely the busiest. So I was talking a lot about braking during the time the slope style was on, so I couldn't actually even see it.
Do those guys brake? Do they use their brakes?
You can't just go because it's a pretty steep hill that they go down. You can't just go as fast as possible to hit all those big jumps or you'd overshoot them. So there's a lot of slowing down, maybe taking a longer line to reduce speed and things like that. So yeah, they're definitely braking. I'd love to measure it.
Yeah, especially because part of the front flip is to remove the, the inertia of the wheels, So they jam both brakes on, I think, to get over the front.
Yeah, I think it's something like that.
Honestly, not a slope style expert, so.
But yeah, so I'm just getting over my cold, hopefully, soon. Hopefully it's not coronavirus, but I did, I was just absolutely worn out. I didn't get to exercise all week. I came back and obviously been sick, so I haven't really done anything. It's been 10 days and I've done one ride. It's pretty sad.
Yeah. Not me, Matt. I am back into it.
Okay. I saw you did a long run when I was flipping through the Strava.
Oh yeah, Strava's good for that. getting back into training, well over motivated. I just wrote an article on the Endurance Training Hub about like not thinking you're Superman in week 1. We've all done it, eh? Like you have a break and you're so motivated, you think you can just get back straight into it. Getting going again. I'm doing run walk. Check that out on my YouTube channel at Rotorua Marathon. Going for hopefully anywhere from like a 2:35 marathon to a 2:38. Trying to get a PB Rotorua using the run walk. So running for a period of time, walking for a period of time. Breaking that down on my YouTube channel. So that's been blown up. As well as my analysis of the new research on the Nike shoes. The alpha flies, cheetah flies, I think Matt calls them. So that's been going well. I did a 10,000 meter race on a track. I don't know if you've done many loop based races, Matt, but 10,000 meters, 10K, 25 laps, on a grass track at 6 p.m. in the evening after a day of work. Whew. It was tough. Did a 35:30 and I was hoping for like 34. So it was one of those real challenging things. Have you done loops? Have you done like what loop races have you done?
So like one big loop, are you talking?
No. Like on an athletics track. So I'm like, there's no kind of escaping what you have left. I just got more of these loops.
Yeah.
Like have you done any of 24-hour races? Like what loops have they been on?
Yeah, those are usually like pretty long, like 10-mile loops. They usually work.
Oh, okay.
But, even an XC race, sometimes it's like 3K, 4K loops, and you might do like 5 or 6 laps. Like, yeah, that's pretty well loopy, eh?
Heaps loops,
yeah,
bro.
Heaps loops. What's even worse is short track mountain bike racing. Like, you've only done a few laps and you're getting lapped. In the pro races. So yeah. So
that's the problem, eh? Like you can be, cause, there's one guy, he ran, 31 minutes last night and like, so he's a bit faster, but not ridiculously faster, but he's going to lap me cause like the laps are only like a minute 20. So
yeah,
you're like, oh man. Matt, are the Olympics going to go ahead?
This stupid coronavirus is like just kind of ruining everything.
As you sniffle?
Yeah, well, I don't think I have it, but I'm self-isolating anyway. There's a Barista Champs on tonight and I'm not gonna go, which is pretty sad. But anyway, so earlier in the week, they announced, so last week actually, there was an announcement in the mountain bike scene that Sea Otter Classic was canceled. And that's never been canceled. Sea Otter's
like
great.
40 years or something, eh?
Yeah, I thought it was 100.
Oh.
No, I don't know how long it's been going on, but I don't think it's ever been canceled. And it's really good because it's an expo as well as lots of races. So there's a lot going on in that show and pretty heavily international attendance. So that was canceled, which was like, wow, okay, I guess events are going to start getting canceled. And a few days after, they announced that the Downhill World Cup, the first race, was canceled or postponed. I was like,
oh, no way, I didn't see that.
Yeah, which I wasn't too concerned. I was like, well, okay, that's fine. I don't have any of my athletes racing that race. But then this morning, I got a text from one of my athletes who just arrived in Colombia. So he's like, yep, just arrived, but the race is postponed. So there's like 2 races in South America and they're both postponed until November. He's there. And there won't be any racing. It's throwing a wrench in everything, really.
Oh man, yeah, Karen, like that, Xterra Asia Pacific Championships, like the biggest prize money in the like Southern Hemisphere for off-road triathlon, cancelled.
Wow.
So that, yeah, like we were supposed to be there, or he's supposed to be there. next weekend, pull all the flights, cancel all the accommodation, train. He was lucky enough because now it's considered for insurance purposes, a world event. So when it's like a kind of it was like, I guess an Asia event, that's like a volcano or something. You're like, oh, I can't travel there. Now it's like a world event. So somehow the insurance companies can weasel out of some of that. But, that's nowhere near as bad as actually traveling to the venue and then being like, no. Yeah. And then another one, Matt, I have a friend, I've talked about her, Alice Mason. She's trying to qualify for the Olympic team in New Zealand. She was going to do that at the Seoul Marathon. That was the goal, cancelled.
Wow.
So now she's scrambling to try and find a fast marathon course within the qualification bracket to go to a games that's potentially going to be cancelled. So those are two people I've direct, and that's, just within my direct association. I can't even imagine. Or the first round of the ITU Triathlon World Series in Dubai, cancelled. And that has Olympic qualification ramifications, points, for different nations and individuals. This is really, and this is just our small little sporting world. We don't even contribute to the GDP.
Well, the sport is, endurance sports maybe are a smaller part of the sporting industry, but the sporting industry worldwide is just absolutely massive. Billions and billions of dollars. And it's affecting every other market. So it's pretty bad. And I have an athlete that just flew with the New Zealand team to California, and they're supposed to be racing this coming weekend. Is it possible that it could just be canceled for this weekend and next? I don't know, but I sure hope not, because he's in really good shape. So,
well, the Tokyo Marathon, I'm not sure if it's been yet, but what they did is they said, we'll have the elite race, but we won't have the mass participation race. So I've heard inklings that may be what they do with the Olympics, where it's like a televised only event. But honestly, I can't see it going ahead. The indoor track and field world champs has been postponed by a year. Man, a tough time to be a professional athlete. It's generally a tough time, but more so now. I'd have no idea what would happen if the Olympics didn't go ahead.
Yeah, so hopefully this can all be sorted soon. I think a lot of it is just hype, and it's just a really big bummer, and it's going to affect a lot of people. So hopefully, everyone, we can keep training and things like that, right? And that's fine, and we can target different events. So we just need to, this isn't the end of it for anyone who's been training, It's just we need to shift our goals, and the goalpost often moves, and training is never straightforward and easy, and there's never a set plan that is going to go ahead without anything interfering. So this is just another minor interference, and we need to change and look at what we need to focus on and be ready. So it's just the wrench in the spokes, and we can't be too phased about that.
Matt, this could be the next push for e-sport, endurance sports, like Zwifting.
Yeah.
This could really, really be a boom for that industry. I got Zwift treadmill running as well. I'm not into it, but no more people.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about much.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it'd be as easy to cheat as it is on the Zwift riding. I guess you could just turn the treadmill up and not run on it. That leads into our topic discussion of the week, the marathon. Training for a marathon. This is massive undertaking for a lot of people. A lot of people kind of think not so much of like a marathon distance now that you've got these crazy things like 100k, 50k, 100 miles becoming more popular. But the marathon is a big undertaking. Anything you'd want to do one in the future, Matt?
Well, I tell you what, when we were racing mountain bikes a lot, my friends and I would always chat and be like, a marathon can't be that hard.
Oh,
right? So that's what we'd say, because like a lot of people do it. Okay, so this was our thinking, like, we're pretty fit. We could easily just go do a marathon and like do okay. And I think like I wasn't running at all, actually. So that was definitely a bit cocky and obviously not really realistic, but yeah, it's
do you
pretty
think
long.
you could do one? Do you think you could do one? I'd pay your entry fee and everything.
Okay.
Do you remember how messed up you were after the 7k?
Yeah. That's because you can run the whole time. I would probably do walk run for a marathon.
Yeah, well, I'd recommend it.
I really I wouldn't be able to do it now and do it well. For sure. I think that was a long time ago that I was thinking, we could just do a marathon and be all good. Now, nah, it just wouldn't happen.
All right, well, I'm gonna after me breaking it down for you, you can train for one and you'll nail it.
Okay. Yeah. Well, tell me about it.
Well, we kind of like to, Matt and I put down sort of the who, what, where, why, how of some of these topics. This one is kind of complex, but when I put down the who, I'm looking at, someone that can run a marathon, 42.2 kilometers, 26 miles. And like, that may sound kind of obvious. You need to look at that and go, am I able to run that distance? If you want to achieve a marathon, most people, like the average time is between 4 and 4.5 hours, which is runnable. You're probably only just walking a little bit for aid stations if there's a super steep hill. Otherwise, you're able to run. That's a runnable pace. And you need to go before the marathon. You need to know you can run 30 kilometers or 20 miles, 32 Ks. And if you can do that, then you'll set yourself, like, that's the who. You are someone who can run a marathon. If you're not at that level, that gets into like my next part of it is don't fool yourself on time goals. Like,
yeah, I'm just curious, like if you, like in any given marathon, how many people are running under 4.5 hours? Is it pretty much everyone? I don't actually know. I would imagine that some people would walk the whole thing, or is everyone?
Some people do,
up for
yeah. So
running?
like that's the average. Entrants, vary all over the show. So you've got probably around 30% going under 4 hours. And then you have probably like 20% of the field situate themselves between like 4 and 5 hours. And then you'd have the remainder going from, 5 to 6 hours, I guess. And yeah, a lot of people would be doing some kind of jog walk, like a lot of people. And then it depends on, like Rotorua Marathon, the one I'm going to do the run walk at, like that's national champs. So that drags the average down. So it depends on what the field is.
Okay.
Like how fast the course is, what competitiveness it has.
Okay. How much, so for the general marathon entry, how much are they running? Like, is this something that they just, like, oh, I'm just going to get off the couch and do this and run under 4 hours, or no? This is a serious question.
They would be running about 3 times a week. At least they should be. Like to go under 4 hours, 3 times a week is the minimum. that I would recommend. And the only way you're going to get around that is if you do a massive bike commute to work, or you're doing a lot of kayaking or something endurance based. If you're going to run sub 4 hours on 2 times a week, just your overall muscular conditioning and fitness probably isn't going to be there, unless you're someone, again, with sports scientists always, it depends. Like if you're a lifetime athlete and you have trained all for the last 10 years for different endurance-based sports, and then you only have 2 days to do your running, and you've run 3 hours or something in the past, or like a 1:20 half marathon, then you're fine. Like, you'll be able to get away with it. It won't be super comfortable. But yeah, 3 times as a minimum. And from my experience as well, just athletes that I deal with, we do 3 as the minimum, 4 as the, recommended.
Nice. So I guess the real difference with running and another endurance, like a cycling sport probably, is the loading. And that's something that you really need to be conditioned for, isn't it? Especially if you're going to be running for that long.
Oh man, you're a super fit guy. I don't want to blow your ego up, but you ride your bike almost every day for a few hours, a whole bunch of hours in the weekend. I've tested your VO2 max. Like, you're as fit as someone's going to get, and you went for one run and were banged up. That just shows that the muscular damage of eccentric loading. So that's like the lengthening of the muscle under load, how much impact that has. And so what can happen, or what happens more often than not, is you get injured, because especially someone like you, Matt, who's really fit, but not conditioned to running. This isn't like swimming or cycling, where if you're really fit, say you're a runner, you can just keep riding your bike, because there's such a small chance of getting injured. Injury is just such a huge part of marathon running, because you are required to run distances, because you're going to be out there running for 4 hours. You need to condition yourself for it. But then you also need to not do so much that your body can't handle it.
That's one of the crazy things to me with running is, so in cycling, when we talk about an injury, we're talking about, we had a crash or something, or we hurt our knee, usually from an impact, from a one-off impact. And what I didn't realize until I, met you, started hanging out with you, learning about what runners do, is when runners are talking about an injury, it's an injury from training. It's not an injury from stepping on your shoelace and falling on a rock. It's an injury because something happened along the way that you weren't able to handle the training that you thought you were, because of how intense the loading is repetitively.
Yeah, and hopefully, if all goes well, we'll have my wife, Emma, on the show next week, who transitioned from a professional cyclist, world champ level cyclist, into running. And she said exactly that, Matt. It was like, the only time I got injured was when I fell off my bike in the 10 years she'd been riding. And now she was injured, you lived with us, Matt, how Emma was injured. She went through all the standard injuries: shin splints, plantar fasciitis, stress fractures. It's something else. Yeah. And it can take, it's really hard to try and interpret where you're going to fall in terms of that injury spectrum, because you can be running along thinking, I'm tired, my legs are a bit banged up, but no pain, no gain, I'm going to get through it. And you might only be running 3 times a week, and you might only be running easy, but for you, that load, and however that load has been distributed, maybe you ran every, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe you ran Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you get injured. So the only thing there is that load for you was too much. Either that load or the way you were handling your body was out of equilibrium. It wasn't the stress response adaptation cycle was not working properly. So that's it's a major one, injury. I'm trying to juggle that, but then, and same with ultra running, it's even worse. And then we're trying to still get you fit.
Yeah. I see that as it's almost like a blessing in disguise, especially looking at it from a coaching perspective or even an athlete perspective. So with cycling sports, we have our power meters and we have our heart rate monitors and we have our performances in the gym, and we're able to kind of track those over time, and we're able to tell if our performance starts suffering, whether or not we've kind of started to do too much or we need a break. But normally what we don't get is we don't get a really bad pain or an injury like you do in running, where it says, okay, you've done enough, you need to pull back. We don't get that at all in cycling. We might just get how'd you feel today? Okay, maybe not great, but maybe a little flat. And it's okay, well, let's look a little bit closer at the data. How's your heart rate response? How's your power? How's your feeling over a long time? But in running, it's pretty cut and dry. Are you hurt? Yeah. Okay, well then you need a break. We just don't really get that at all.
Yeah, and you know how you said the heart rate's power output response. The output response for running very clearly shows fatigue, just due to the sheer amount of energy and force or power, I guess, especially if now we have power meters, that is required to run fast. So Matt, within any training cycle, you're going to have some form of hard tempo interval, something or other. And in running, if you're tired or you're getting overreaching over training into that area, you're going to struggle so much just to meet. You'll just be so far out of your time that you probably won't even complete your workout. Just the muscle is clearly not recovered enough for you to be able to do that. And it takes, you'd have to train so much for such a long time in cycling to give your muscles that much deep fatigue to not be able to complete a workout within a certain amount of percent, or to not even be able to complete a 20-minute hill climb or something. Whereas in running, we can see that pretty easily. And with athletes, I can clearly see hey, you should be able to do this workout within, 10 to 15 second, per kilometer. So you might be a little bit slower, but when you're starting to not be able to complete it, or just not even in the same world, that's another one. Say, all right, let's chill out. And you don't really get to run easy,
Yeah, I think that's great. I think it's the actual benefit of training for marathon. And because as coaches, that's one of the main things we look for is when enough is enough. And we're constantly watching that. So, obviously we don't want anyone to get injured. So we need to stop before that happens. And it's pretty cut and dry. So what do you think the main components are? So if we get that's our who. Who can run a marathon? What are the main components of training for a marathon?
The main component, well, we've got fitness trumps speed. These are the things I wrote down. Fitness trumps speed, fitness and threshold, distance and duration, consistency every single week. So when I say fitness trumps speed, you don't need to be fast to run a marathon. Even the fastest guys, and girls, let's say fast is anyone under 3 hours. Even at the very top end, when they're running 2:10, I won't really relate to the sub 2 hour or that ridiculous speeds. 2:20, they're running a bit over 3-minute kilometers all the way up to 4-minute Ks. That's going to get you anywhere from a 2:10 to a 2:40. These are really impressive times and they're fast. When these guys or girls who can run these times, they're able to run like a 5 kilometer in under 3-minute Ks. And most people would be able, most runners, if they're training sort of 3 to 4 times a week, can probably run 1 kilometer at a 4-minute K. And so it's not fast. It's not a 100, a 200 meter, 400 meter kind of speed. It's very much within the realm of possibilities because it's more like your aerobic capacity to maintain a certain speed.
You don't need to be a sprinter to do a marathon, right? Like Usain Bolt, he's really fast over a really short distance. That's really fast. But you don't need that kind of speed to do a marathon probably ever, do you?
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, if you can do something for even the fastest guys for 2 hours, that's not fast. Like, running for 2 hours isn't fast, So it's about how fit you can be, because the fitter you are, the faster you'll run at a given percentage of your max capacity. So the other episode we talked about VO2 max, like kind of what it means. VO2 max, maximal amount of oxygen you can use to produce or convert into mechanical force. So to help move you forward through space. You get the fitter you are, higher VO2 max up into a ceiling, and then you start to be able to run or ride or whatever at higher percentages of that VO2 max. And then you get more efficient, you might lose some weight. Now you don't require as much energy, and all those benefits start to contribute to more speed as you run. And that's just through fitness. That's like, Matt, we hammer it too many times probably. Aerobic based training is going to benefit you across all endurance sports. And then, so that's why, like, the first one is fitness trumps speed. Like, if you can just get out, you're going to minimize your risk of injury, and you're going to be able to actually be fit enough to run the whole thing. Then the next one is fitness and threshold. Again, like, speed is very risky in running. It requires a lot of force, a lot of ground reaction forces.
It's all that loading, right? Because the faster you run, the more loading there is on every step, because you have more energy forcing your legs into an eccentric contraction, right? Otherwise you'd collapse. And the faster you go, the more that loading is.
Yeah, so when your forefoot or your foot hits the ground when you run, your quad muscle is elongated, but it still needs to contract and exert force. Otherwise, you'd land and you'd just collapse. After you've done like a huge effort, especially anyone who has run a marathon before or an ultra marathon, you struggle to walk. You can barely walk down stairs or anything because you feel like you're going to collapse because those muscles are so worn out. And that's, and obviously, like, the faster you go, the higher that force output is, and the bigger the damage. And that's all down through the leg. And then if you don't have like the fully correct biomechanics, some of that loading is going to be transferred into the bones. And that's where we start to get shin splints, stress fractures, those kind of things. With threshold, it's aerobic and aerobic threshold. So you're going to be running, depends on what your speed is. You need to be able to have the ability to buffer lactate and acidity within the muscle cell. And you also need to be able to utilize oxygen while exerting relatively high energetic outputs while you're running at like your marathon speed. And that was, I guess, I don't know, is that how you would sort of term threshold? Threshold's one of those like ambiguous terms that gets floated around.
Yeah, I usually term it's your upper limit of aerobic metabolism. So
Yeah.
it's kind of the speed or pace or output that it's the maximum you could maintain for about an hour. And that's a really good way to think about it, because if you think about the maximum that you could maintain for 10 minutes, that's going to be a lot faster than what you could do for an hour. So when we think about threshold, it's usually what you could do at a maximum for 1 hour. And as you can imagine, it's much lower than what you do for 1 minute or 10 minutes. And probably much faster than what you'd do for 10 hours, like at the ultras that you do.
Yeah. Yeah. And like one of the reasons if you go for 10 minutes and it's a lot higher but can't be continued for as long is that accumulation of acidity and lactate and anaerobic contribution to your output that then like you can now no longer anaerobically work without oxygen to continue to produce those outputs.
Yeah. So anytime you're above your threshold, what you end up doing is relying on anaerobic metabolism. And that's basically, you can think of it as your sprint ability. So if you exceed your threshold, you start to deplete your ability to sprint. And there's all those metabolic byproducts of that if you continue at that pace. So that's why when we do threshold stuff, we try and keep it at a maintainable pace. And we work on that because then we don't need to deplete our sprint ability.
Yeah, it's like 100% the reason for intervals. And you can do, let's say 5 by 5 minutes at the given high output because you have that recovery period in, rather than us, or a coach giving you 1 10-minute interval and you being completely depleted and taking another 20 minutes or day to recover before you can do it again. So then, yeah, we have the threshold, and that's about where if you can work at that, you can start to push up. You can increase your ability to buffer lactate, because as lactate accumulates, or the anaerobic metabolic byproducts, it's not just lactate, that can slow you down. So if you just have an increased rate of that, then increased rate of lactate metabolism, you can increase an output that way. So, and that's kind of where you want to be sitting, around that half marathon pace, where there's going to be an accumulation of lactate, especially over the second half, last quarter. So you want to work on that, and that's around stuff like I like to introduce a lot of marathon paced workouts within my programs, long ones as well. 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, 3 by 5 kilometers. Because you got to remember, you want to be running for the majority of people, 4 to 4.5 hours. And you can't escape the need to run at those outputs, like your goal time. Some people are going to say, yeah, I want to run 4 hours. If you go out, about 6 weeks out and you can't do sort of 20 something kilometer workout that includes, say, 2 by 10k intervals, if you can't do that within 15 seconds of your goal time, or like pace, let's say it's 6-minute kilometers, if you can't do 6-minute or 6:15 kilometers within training for just 2 by 10, you've got a rest interval in between, and you're only cumulatively doing 20 kilometers at your goal pace, and you've given yourself a 15 second per kilometer buffer, you need to really rethink what you are able to achieve on race day. And I see this, yeah. Matt, you must see it like just, expectations exceeding abilities.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really easy to measure in running. I think that's one of the benefits, is that you can go out and you can try 10Ks at your marathon pace, see how it feels. Would you be able to do this for 4 hours? No. Okay, so then you move the goalpost, right? And it's easy. And if it comes really easy to you, if you do 10Ks at your goal marathon pace, then maybe you think about, well, actually, maybe I can go a little bit faster. But it really helps you to set a really good pacing strategy and to know what to expect / set a really good achievable and measurable goal for the event. And that's one of the benefits that runners have. We don't have that in cycling so much because a lot of the race, cycling sports are faster first off, so there's drafting that's happening, and there's a lot of intermittent efforts, and it's really hard to judge the recovery between that, and also to judge what the average or normalized power is going to be for something like a mountain bike or cycling race, because there's so many other factors. Runners have a really good or a really easy time of doing that and setting a goal time. That's one of the things that I like about it, because as you know, I love pacing.
Well, outwards looking in, Matt, it is easy. It should be really easy. But there are, you only have to look at the last 10 kilometers, the last quarter of a marathon. There are plenty of people who have got it incredibly wrong. And yeah, just going on with the cycling and the mountain biking, one of the reasons it's so hard to predict is, unlike running, which is essentially a time trial, because you're able to dictate the output you put in, to get to the finish. In a race, drafting is so beneficial. Being within the race, you've got different climbs and descents. You keep tapping into that anaerobic work capacity that we talked about above threshold, but then you also go well below it. Whereas, in running, we just have to kind of sit as close to it as we hopefully can maintain.
Yeah, you can't really coast, can you?
There is zero coasting. Going downhill is almost more expensive energetically than running uphill.
Yeah. That because of that increased loading, right? Because then your gravity's helping you to load your legs as you're running downhill. So you get that increased eccentric loading going downhill, which is, that's crazy.
You get more muscular damage, but you have less energetic input. So it may appear like it's like you're gaining, I guess, from running downhill, but you're also losing in a different way.
Yeah.
And that just doesn't, I guess it kind of exists, in mountain biking. You've showed that in some of your early research. But it's just so unique in that way, because when you go run up a hill, you're not running very fast. So there's not a lot of eccentric loading, because actually the gradient of the hill is helping you to not, have as much ground reaction force when you foot plant. But then the energetic cost is high. So
yeah,
it's
it's one of those crazy things with running. There's one thing I kind of wanted to add along the threshold a bit that I think is kind of important to remember, and that's the higher we have our threshold, the easier it is to run fast without it feeling hard. So this is cycling or running, anything like that, endurance based. So we can maintain our threshold intensity for something like an hour, which doesn't sound like it really means much for a marathon, which might take 4 hours. But if we can increase the pace that we could maintain for 1 hour, that just means that anything slower than that we can maintain for a really long time is going to feel easier / be faster.
Yeah. And that is exactly what happened to me last night on that 10K, essentially a time trial on the track. So I had 2 weeks completely off training after the ultra. And even before the ultra, I wasn't focusing on my anaerobic capacity. And I'm back into training for 2 weeks, one hard 5K club run. And I go in expecting, to be at the capacity I would be, if I had actually worked on that. But instead it was just so incredibly hard to run fast. It was just so foreign and uncomfortable. It didn't feel like a matter of that I was, not capable. It's just, you know what it's like. Everyone knows what it's like. Have some time off and then go try and do something fast. It's ridiculously uncomfortable.
Yeah, I know the feeling. I'm going to feel it in a few days once my cold is gone and I start riding again. It's not going to feel nice.
So I get that leads into pacing, and it's just like it is in most endurance sports, especially in a marathon. it's so important to get your pacing and understand your limitations. Like, you've done the training. Hopefully, you've grabbed a training plan off the Endurance Training Hub, and you've got a very well designed training plan with recovery weeks and specific workouts with specific training zones. So, okay, look, I did a half marathon. I highly recommend doing half marathons anywhere from 5 to 3 weeks out. And that's going to give you a very good, and do that within training. So you're under a bit of fatigue, and you should be able to do half, well, how do I say it? You want to be able to double your half marathon plus 6 minutes. And that gives you like a good kind of reference point as to what you may be able to achieve. And you want to do that and some of your like really key sort of like those 2x20 or 2x10, sorry, on a course that's similar to your marathon. Like, there's no point going out, smashing flat tracks, beefing up your ego on how fast you can run and thinking you're going to do that on a hilly marathon. Or like just running with a tailwind, trying to get the times that you think you need to represent.
It's like Training Peaks doping.
Yeah.
By like just cheating the terrain or the conditions to like feel way doper than you might be. Yeah. It's specificity, right? Like, you need to train in a way that's specific to your competition. Like, you don't always need to. Like, if your marathon's going to be hilly, you don't need to always be going up and down hills, because maybe the loading isn't appropriate at certain times. And you can do a lot of the base training in non-specific terrain, which is kind of what we do with mountain biking. Like, we might train for mountain biking in the gym or on the road, but that doesn't mean we're not getting better for mountain biking. But then when it's time to race, we're getting pretty specific and doing our specific race training.
That's exactly it. Like, if you are a trail runner, but you want to do a road marathon because you want to see how you're going, like, go run on the trails. Go run on the trails for like the majority of your non-specific sessions. But when it comes down to it and it says whatever the kind of session is, it should have specifics on it. Like, I'll put them in all my plans. Like, this needs to be done, blah, 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 on blah, blah, blah. And so you go, okay. But then outside of that, aerobic 60-minute run, do it wherever you want. Because the main goal of that is to increase fitness, and that happens just by being on your feet. Actually, Matt, this is a bit of a rant here. Okay, ready?
Go ahead.
Why is running one of those things where stopping is not okay? Like with everyone thinks I need to run point to point, like start to finish. Walking is for losers. Walking is for the unfit people. Whereas like in swimming, you stop at the end of the pool. Mountain biking, stop, at the bottom or the top of the trail, whatever, catch up with your mates, stop to have a drink. Like cycling, same kind of thing, smash it up the hill, wait for the mates at the top or the bottom, or have a coffee. And running is like, nah, we're starting and we're not stopping till we finish. Just grinds my gears.
Does it?
Like, 'cause it's like,
do you like to stop?
Or like run, walk, not stop, but like walk. Like, I walk a lot, and when I'm like not feeling it, I'm going upstairs. It's like, obviously I've got the run walk, and the run walk is like blowing people's minds, because people are like, what? Walking during running? Like, that's outrageous. But in any other sport, it's like stopping or cruising. Like, no one expects you to keep pedaling and putting effort in on a downhill on a road bike. It's ridiculous. It's like a great chance to recover.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Well, if you consider that, like, so if you look at like your power file from any road ride, even if you're trying to pedal on the downhills, there's so much time coasting that like you might as well just have a break once in a while, because the amount of time you spend at zero power, even if you're trying to pedal the whole time, is massive. It might be like, 15 or 20% of the time.
Yeah, but like, you went running. You were doing a bunch of running. Did you ever feel like, yeah, I'll just like stop for a bit?
No, never. No.
Never. It's just not it's just something people don't do. Like, you run start to finish. Because you would have felt like you were cheating, right? Like, not achieving the best out of yourself if you stopped for a bit.
Yeah.
Why is that?
I don't know. You know who has a really easy time at stopping during runs?
Who?
Influencers. Because you gotta like stop to get the gram, right? So you do that photo,
right.
The one that you showed me where you're like, that person's not running because they're like jumping in the air, right? And it looks like you're running.
Yeah.
So you have an easy time stopping if you're an influencer.
Yes, true.
So I guess you'd know that, wouldn't you?
Yeah,
As an influencer yourself.
Yeah, but if you ever look at my videos on YouTube, I'm almost always running while I'm talking. So I actually have to run back to where it's the light's better. And so I do more running, less stopping.
Yeah.
But yeah, influencers, but like, treat yourself as an influencer.
Yeah.
Stop every once in a while. Get some photos.
Yeah. Smell the fresh air. You know, like this is an actual issue with training, and maybe this is a whole episode on its own, but there are a lot of people that will train and, you know, not stop and smell the roses and like see the scenery, enjoy what they're doing, always focused on the numbers. I think that's kind of detrimental in a way. So yeah, like stopping is okay.
That's one of the downfalls of Strava as well.
Yeah, I was thinking that actually. Like, it could be because of Strava, because it'll increase your time and reduce your overall speed, or, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But if you stop, you don't move, Strava just clips it. You know?
Yeah.
It just takes it out. I was saying to that people I was running with, it's like, look, if we stop, Strava's going to trim this regardless. Okay? So just no one move.
Nice. And you go off and get a few extra Ks.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll do an episode on that one, I think, because, you know, the kind of psychology of training, maybe not even psychology of racing, but yeah. So one of the things that I've always wondered is kind of about the equipment and the nutrition for like a marathon. I remember this one time we had to do like a 1 mile test, and all I had was these skate shoes. This was like my first year at uni. And,
like some big tongue DVS or something?
Yeah, like those Osiris's that are like, look like they're 36 sizes too big. And yeah, they're really heavily padded. I didn't even skate. But, I ran, a 1 mile as fast as I could in that. And I was just absolutely blown for a really long time. Do you think shoes and stuff can really help to like make your training and your racing more comfortable?
Yeah, well, I don't want to get into the whole, you know, new era of shoes. Just they're faster. I could kind of establish that. Check out the video I did on YouTube on that, and there's multiple other videos. So we got the new shoes. Most people probably aren't going to spend $500 on a pair of shoes. It's just like, because these ones don't last that long. They're just for racing. And, most people are running 4 to 4.5 hours, more interested in like personal improvement and completion of the event and achieving a time, not so much like trying to win the race or eke out another 1%. Right. So, but then shoes are the point of contact with the ground. And that's the only point of contact with the ground you have, and really the only piece of equipment you have to aid in your performance, and also to help prevent and I guess fight against injury. And for the cost of it, especially if you've come from one of, you know, a bike sport, whatever it is, or even like a swimming, the equipment cost, if you buy the brand new pair of shoes at full retail price, I don't know if anyone does that anymore, but that's like 280 New Zealand dollars. What's that in US dollars, Matt? 50? 30?
I don't even know. 150.
It's like shoes are overall cheap, especially like cheaper than going to have to see a physio after you've got some form of injury or having time off. So getting the right pair of shoes that's going to work with your specific technique. But the hardest thing is to try and figure out what those shoes are. In your arsenal of shoes, your equipment bag, I generally recommend to have a pair of Hokas. Hokas are a well padded, soft shoe that reduces the ground impacts. Something like a Hoka Clifton, doesn't matter what model it is, just get the old model because they're always really cheap. They're a soft shoe and maybe a more supportive one, like a Bondi or something. One that's relatively rigid, quite high, and just works to, the goal of the shoe is to really reduce the ground reaction force, the impact on the ground, try and protect your legs. They've also got like this kind of rocker plate in it that's theoretically meant to enhance the way at which your foot hits the ground, so it's more forefoot based rather than heel striking.
Yeah, so that's one of the things I always wonder. As like a hobby biomechanist kind of guy, I love this is why the barefoot running movement kind of happened, is because obviously if you're heel striking, the forces are being directed through your leg. So striking with your heel is not ideal. So when you run barefoot, what happens is, well, that really hurts. So you end up hitting with your forefoot, which is much easier to dampen the impact muscularly. But what happens then is if we get a shoe that is heavily padded at our heel, what we end up doing is just heel striking because it doesn't hurt. And some of the forces are being dampened by the shoe, but the rest of them, and still a lot of them, are being translated through our legs. And you can still get those overuse injuries just from the heel strike. So, in a way, the padded shoes I always saw as like a band-aid for a running form has this massive braking force from a heel strike. What do you think about the whole... I know it's a can of worms that I'm about to kind of open here, but what do you think about the whole barefoot running thing, or maybe a minimalist shoe that doesn't allow you to heel strike at all because it hurts so bad?
Like you said, where padded shoes are a band-aid for bad running form, trying to correct that form from the point of contact generally just leads to an equal, if not greater, chance of injury. So what I mean, like, I have a really good running form. I land under my center of mass. I land on my forefoot. It's just naturally, I'm quite lucky. I used to overstride. I've worked on that a little bit. But anyway, I used to run in minimalist shoes because I felt like they gave me a better ground feel. Like I could feel what I was doing with my technique better. But then I got given from my sponsor Salming, like this really padded, responsive pair of shoes, the Salming Greyhound. And I was like, wow, these just protect my legs so much better. Doesn't do anything to my form because my form is overall good. And it doesn't really matter what shoes I wear. My running form is going to be the same. Now I'm just protecting my legs from some of that ground impact. Then if you were to go, okay, this person's got a really padded shoe and now they're able to overstride, land on the heel, apply a big braking force, transfer that up like the actual bones and rather than like through the muscular tendon and muscle belly, give them like a really light pair of shoes. They're still going to overstride. They're just going to overstride on their forefoot, put a whole bunch more pressure on their calves. Who knows how stable their glutes and ITBs and hamstring quad muscle recruitment, that whole chain of events. Who knows how like efficient that is to be able to handle this drastically different loading profile, which is still applying like this big braking force. It doesn't, like, just because you put on a different pair of shoes isn't going to make you turn into Eliud Kipchoge. Like you're not addressing the fundamental issue that is causing the heel strike overstride in the first place. Does that make sense?
So I guess you see the barefoot running bit as a band-aid for a band-aid in a way.
It's one of those, like, you can't do intervals all the time because you burn yourself out. You can't do barefoot running all the time because you'll injure yourself. You might even like stand on a piece of glass, but you can use it within your bag of tricks to try. And barefoot running is still different than running in minimalist shoes as well.
Okay.
But I highly recommend like, doing the end of your run and running like I did last night. We did the track race, took my shoes off, mainly because I had blisters, but did my warm down in bare feet.
Yeah.
So
I remember going to a session with you a long time ago, and we did that, and well, Kiwi kids, like always, are pretty much barefoot. I remember going to like a school in New Zealand and doing some max testing on bikes with them, and most of the kids just like didn't know where their shoes were because they like just love being barefoot, so they end up running around the playground barefoot. And I think they just have this opportunity to develop an appropriate running ability from such a young age, at least to a greater extent than kids that always have shoes on. And I remember doing that barefoot cool down with you, and like I'm pretty much never barefoot, and like the grass tickled my feet, and yeah, it was just so bizarre for me, but I could definitely see how it could help, and I thought that was a pretty cool thing that we did.
Yeah, so that's it. Like, depends on where you are, but it's quite an easy way to incorporate that, especially when you're tired at the end of the run, and you may be relying more on the shoe to dampen the impacts, to then get a better feel, like, oh wow, like I can really feel kind of where my hips are situated in terms of where my foot lands, because they should be foot should be under the hip. So yeah, that was kind of like long-winded way to answer about shoes. But yeah, and it's really trial and error. Like you can go try and see some fitted person, in the running store, but they don't know how you're on a treadmill. You're not running, downhill on concrete or on gravel. Like this, you don't know how tight you were that day. It's kind of trial and error. I recommend neutral shoes, because then they're not acting as a band-aid as much. Like if you pronate or supinate, those are generally quite natural foot movements. And if you start to put more supportive structures within your shoe to stop those movements, then you're not gaining the musculature to support them on your own. And maybe if you do transfer to like a lighter racing shoe, you have the higher potential to then get injured because you haven't developed that muscle.
Yeah, very interesting stuff.
Yeah, and then the other question, way we can end it off was around nutrition, I guess.
Yeah, so what are you, like, I know you have drink stops during the marathon, and you usually, when you're doing run walk, you're planning around, if you're going to walk close to an aid station because you have the opportunity to actually like drink, take on your nutrition, things like that. Most people aren't stopping for nutrition when they're training, as we just talked about. So what kind of strategies do you have for nutrition, especially in training?
Yeah, it is a interesting one. It's around like road runners, because I used to never take water. Like I'd hold on to a gel. if I was going over 2 hours. Then when I got into ultra running, you just, like, it could be, you training and racing for so long, you need to be prepared for, maybe the first hour you won't, or 2 hours you won't have an aid station, but you're going to need to drink water because you've still got to exercise for so long. So I started training, taking water and more gels and stuff with me in training. And it made a huge difference. Huge difference to my ability to complete my sessions, and a huge ability for me to recover. No surprising there, really, isn't it?
You probably need water. You can get dehydrated really quickly. We're always breathing out water. So
yeah, and
sweating.
It's true. So I started to plan my sessions better, that because you also don't want to try and do like a marathon tempo run with 2 liters of water on your back, because that's not how it's going to go on race day, and it's most definitely 2 kgs is going to slow you down. So you want to potentially do some sort of loop or out and back base course where you can grab a drink and grab a gel and take that with you for the next couple of kilometers, and then ditch it and grab it on the way back or something. Maybe you've got children who can ride bikes and love spending time with you. They can just ride their bike and start handing you stuff as you need it.
They could just like wear the camelback and carry all your stuff.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to when James is old enough to do that.
Yeah, Jimothy's gonna have like this trailer on his bike.
Yeah, especially when I start getting into like those super ultras, like 200 milers or something.
Yeah.
Like, I'm gonna need a lot of options.
He'll have you dialed, no doubt.
But yeah, so what I set up, is I always check if the marathon provides, like specialty aid stations where you're allowed to drop your own bottle. Most of them do. And I'll put in a gel, and I'll put in that in 200 mils of water. And I try to get that every 20 to 30 minutes. So I'm trying to get in like 60 grams of carbs. You can try to get more, but it's a risk reward thing. Due to the intensity you're running at, you're probably okay with 60 grams, maybe even a little less if you're, closer to 5 hours. And you definitely, you want to make sure that you are drinking enough, especially if it's a hot day. And the way you can understand how much fluid you need is when you do one of your runs, if you run with a camelback or a couple handheld bottles, or, your child with like 50 water bottles attached to them. How much do you drink? Like, how thirsty are you? Like, oh yeah, I know I normally drink 1 liter to 1.5 liters an hour if it's a hot day and I'm running at, a high intensity. So I know, I could probably get away with a bit less, because the race for me is, 2.5 to 2 hours 40. I can be a bit depleted by the end, but I'm going to need at least 600, 800 mils within an hour. So I need a plan for that. And that's really hard to do if you run through an aid station and rely on the cup. Getting a cup.
A small cup that you spill mostly on your chin.
Yes. Yeah. And it also, it means, because maybe you spilt all the Powerade or Gatorade on your chin. So now you got 1 gram of carb and 10 mils of water. It's really not ideal.
Yeah.
So the run walk helps with that, but also setting up specialty aid stations. I get little water bottles, just the cheap ones that, you buy a pack of water bottles, with water already in them. Just empty some of that out, put a gel in it, and maybe tape a gel to it, if I need an extra one between the aid stations because it's too far apart. That stops me having to carry 10 gels right from the start. And it's not too complex really. It's try to understand what you need. If you need 60 grams of carbohydrates an hour, you don't want to get it all at once. You want to space it out. And then you also need, let's say you need 500 mils to a litre of water. What's your plan to be able to get that? What's your pacing strategy? Like, okay, I want to run 4 hours. What's my average pace? Okay, I don't want to go over that. I'm going to negative split. Are there hills where I'm going to be running a bit slower? Then have a look at the aid stations. How far apart are the aid stations? If it's 5Ks and you're running 5-minute Ks, it's going to take you 25 minutes about to get between aid stations. That's like simple maths. Just look at that kind of stuff to know I'm going to need to carry a gel because I want one every 15 minutes. And it's going to be 30 minutes between these aid stations. So have a look at the video I put out on YouTube because I talked about that, for my plan for the run, walk and Rotorua Marathon. Yeah, I mean, that's really it, Matt, I think.
Yeah, and I think what you have on Endurance Training Hub, I think you have some things that help you plan for a marathon as far as your strategy during the race. And you also have, I believe, marathon training plans, don't you?
I do, Matt. I do. Yep. Go on there. All members, $10 a month, get 50% off all training plans. They're available on my own platform or on Training Peaks. So, yeah, if you need a plan, get on that. Right, thanks, Matt. Now we have the winner of the Fern Glen Farms probiotic sheep milk giveaway. 12 bottles of amazing performance sheep milk. And that is Suzanne Oliver.
Nice.
Suzanne. It's Suzanne.
Okay.
Alright, Suzanne. Get in contact. Just drop us a line on one of our many social media pages and we will hook you up.
Yeah, that stuff's pretty good. We tried it and it tastes actually delicious. So sheep milk is probably one of the next big things, especially in New Zealand. So it's made in New Zealand, which is really cool. So get in touch.
Just made in Wairarapa. It'll be it's going to be once everyone's on it, you heard it here first because it's going to be like the next superfood. Sheep milk, flavored sheep milk, Fern Glen Farms. All right, Matt, you have a good week, eh?
Yeah, we'll see you next week.
All right, catch you later. Thanks, everybody.